and a new UN report seek to eliminate childhood innocence. PPFI sex ed manuals describe to fifth graders that commercial sex worker is a normal career. California sex ed curriculum is normalizing abortion for middle schoolers, and the UN report, sparing details, calls for decriminalizing the sexual predation of minors. This is Life News Radio. In other stories, a federal judge has ruled Colorado may not censor pro-life pregnancy centers. Bella Health near Denver sued the state after discovering they could be fined $20,000 for even trying to save an unborn life. Bella Health often has success with reversing chemical abortions. Rather than wait for new law, Netherlands Health Minister Hugo de Jong is simply expanding Groningen protocol infanticide this year to cover euthanizing children to age 12 in what critics say are even some treatable conditions. And abortion-friendly Democrats are using legacy media to deny Florida Governor Ron DeSantis' chances in 2024 and say Republicans cannot win on abortion. SBA Pro-Life says Republicans who waffle on abortion lose to pro-abortion candidates, but strong pro-life candidates win elections. For pro-life headlines delivered to your email address daily, sign up at lifenews.com. This has been Life News Radio.
This is Rick Paolini, one of the on-air hosts for the Station of the Cross Spring 2023 Appeal. The authentic message of our Catholic faith is so needed in our world today. We come to you asking for your prayers and financial support. For our spring appeal to be successful, we will need the continued support of our loyal donors. In addition, this spring I am asking in a special way for those who listen but may have never supported us financially to please consider a first-time gift. Your first-time gift will make a significant difference to the success of our appeal. I look forward to being with you May 1st to May 5th. Thank you for your prayers and support. You may make your gift today by calling 1-877-711-8500. You can also donate at thestationofthecross.com or on the iCatholic Radio app. May God bless you.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for April 19th. Today we celebrate Saint Gianna Beretta Molla. In fewer than 40 years of life, Gianna Molla became a pediatrician, wife, mother, and saint. The 10th of 13 children, Gianna earned degrees in medicine and surgery, eventually opening a clinic in Mazzaro, Italy. Her 1955 marriage to Peter Molla was a happy one, and together they became the parents of a son and 2 daughters. Early in her 4th pregnancy, Gianna learned that a tumor was growing in her uterus along with the baby. Although the doctors recommended performing a hysterectomy, Gianna insisted that they remove only the offending tumor. With great faith and courage, Gianna made the choice that enabled her child to survive. 7 months later, Gianna died from childbirth complications following the delivery of her 3rd daughter, Gianna Emanuela. At her canonization in 2004, Pope John Paul II said of Gianna Beretta Molla, "This holy mother of a family remained heroically faithful to the commitment she made on the day of her marriage. The extreme sacrifice she sealed with her life testifies that only those who have the courage to give of themselves totally to God and to others are able to fulfill themselves." There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
This is Joe McLean, and you're listening to the Station of the Cross, proclaiming the fullness of the truth with clarity and charity.
Heard around the world on your Android and Apple mobile devices.
Go into the world and tell every man that you meet, there is a man on the cross.
A Catholic Take. What you need to know right now. A bold synthesis of inspiration and information. Keeping you up to date on the news and issues from a courageous Catholic perspective.
A Catholic Take with Joe McClain starts now.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McClain. So good to be on with you this morning. Praise be to God. BlackRock, the company that seems to own the whole world. What you need to know. That's what we're going to cover today on the program with Andreas Wailzer from LifeSite News. He's coming up at 30 past the hour. He has a pretty detailed article at LifeSite News on BlackRock, and we're going to dive into it. ESG, stakeholder, LGBTQ agenda, World Economic Forum. Did you know there's a program that controls $20 trillion in assets? It's true. A computer runs it all. We're going to have that conversation with Andreas Wailzer at 30 past the hour. At 15 past the hour, Matt Maloney from iCatholicMusic is going to be on the program. Were you aware that the Station of the Cross Catholic Media Network owns the only Catholic artist-driven music app in the world, as far as I know? And we're going to have that conversation at 15 past the hour. So many news stories to talk to you about. We are, of course, going to share all of the details with you in our show notes, which you can find linked up at thestationofthecross.com/ACT. By the way, I have a couple of speaking gigs coming up. April the 28th at the Fullness of Truth Conference in Houston, Texas. Also, I'm coming to Albany, New York for the National Men's March on June 3rd. So if you are anywhere near Albany, New York, I would love to hang out with you. Men, all men are welcome. Bring your sons too to the National Men's March. We'll be having more on that conversation in the coming days and weeks. But let's pray. Let's get started. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. Amen. Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thine intercession was left unaided. Inspired by this confidence, I fly unto thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen. In the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost. And now your saint of the day, Saint Elphege, pray for us. Elphege was born in 954 to a noble English family, but at a very young age he renounced his wealth and entered a monastery. He lived like a hermit in his cell for some time, but his piety became so well known that eventually he was made an abbot. In 984, he was consecrated Bishop of Winchester, where he built many churches and installed an organ in the cathedral that could be heard a mile away. Is that the prototype to iCatholicMusic? I'm just curious. It was said that there were no beggars in his diocese, thanks to his charity. In 10,006, he was made Archbishop of Canterbury, where he continued his reputation for discipline and reform, as well as personal piety. Just a few years later, though, the Danes raided England and besieged Canterbury. Elphege was encouraged to escape, but he refused to abandon his flock. The Danes sacked the city, massacring the population despite Elphage's pleas to stop, and the bishop was made prisoner. Even as a captive, he was able to convert many of the Danes by healing those that were sick. He refused to be ransomed, however, and eventually his captors, in a drunken rage, beat him, stoned him, and finally struck him in the head with an axe, killing him on April the 19th, 1012. Elphege was canonized in 1078 by Pope Gregory VII. St. Thomas Becket, another Archbishop of Canterbury, was praying for Elphage's intercession just before his own murder in 1170. Saint Elphege, pray for us. And now your headline news. The Blaze reports Chinese spy balloon may have had advanced radar that can see through objects. The spy balloon, now referred to as Killian 23, is now known to have had a series of perplexing features after classified documents were leaked by a 21-year-old Air National Guardsman. Killian 23, along with other balloons labeled Bulger 21 and Arcado 2021, were detailed in the classified documents. According to leaked images, Killian 23 had complex reconnaissance capabilities, which could have included the synthetic aperture radar known as SAR. SAR works by sending microwave pulses at the Earth to create images. This allows for nighttime imagery and reconnaissance that passes through objects in nature that can disrupt visibility, such as clouds, smoke, topsoil, ice, and snow, but it can also see through thin materials such as tarps. The balloon also had a parabolic dish with sensors and solar panels that could generate up to 10,000 watts of power. The engineers at the National Space Intelligence Center say that this could power any type of surveillance technology, including radar. And just think, it passed over sensitive military sites several times. Breitbart reports Macron begs French public for 100 days to solve national crisis as fiery riots continue. With the backdrop of fiery protests in Paris and Bordeaux, President Macron, in his first comments since signing the controversial pension reform last week, asked the nation to give his government 100 days to implement an action plan to address the myriad of grievances held among the French people. Acknowledging the widespread opposition to his move to raise the retirement age from 62 to 64 years old without a vote, which has contributed to widespread protests and riots over the past month, Mr. Macron admitted in a national address that, quote, a consensus has not been found, close quote. Macron first promised to open up negotiations with trade unions that have been the backbone of the street protests and strikes since the last autumn over the cost of living wage increases and soaring inflation. He also vowed to step up policing the countryside and enforcement on illegal immigration, while increasing efforts to integrate legal immigrants into French culture and society. Daily Wire reports 1 killed, 5 injured after parking garage collapses in New York City. The collapse happened around 4 p.m. when the second floor of the 5-story parking structure gave way and collapsed onto the ground floor. The New York Times reported New York City Mayor Eric Adams wrote on Twitter, quote, our first responders rescued 5 of our fellow New Yorkers from the partial collapse of the parking garage on Ann Street between Nassau and William. They have been taken to the hospital, close quote. A witness told local media that he heard, quote, a really big boom, close quote, before the parking garage collapsed. An investigation into how this happened is underway. And those are your headline news. The gospel today comes to us from John chapter 3, verses 16 through 21. God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, so that everyone who believes in him might not perish, but might have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world might be saved through him. Whoever believes in him will not be condemned, but whoever does not believe has already been condemned, because he has not believed in the name of the only begotten Son of God. And this is the verdict, that the light came into the world, but people preferred darkness to light, because their works were evil. For everyone who does wicked things hates the light, and does not come toward the light, so that his works might not be exposed. But whoever lives the truth comes to the light, so that his works may be clearly seen as done in God. The Gospel of the Lord. Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ. Haydock's commentary today said he was then his Son, his only begotten Son. Before he sent him into the world, he was his Son. He was not, therefore, his Son only by incarnation, but was his Son from the beginning, as he was also his Word from all eternity. This was the constant doctrine of the Church and of the Fathers against the heresy of the Arians, that God was always Father and the Son always the eternal Son of the eternal Father. Father McKeevely wrote, God's object in sending his Son was to bestow on them everlasting life. For although, looking to God's justice, the world would deserve condemnation for its sins, still it was not to display his justice in judging and condemning the world that God sent his Son in the first instance, but to exercise mercy, which is over all his works, quote, that the world may be saved by him, close quote, by rescuing them from everlasting death and bestowing on them everlasting life. Hence, God wills, by a sincere antecedent will, the salvation of all mankind. Such of them as are lost through their own fault. No doubt, as at his second coming on the day of judgment, the Son of God will display his justice, reward and punishing them according to their deserts, judging every man according to his works. Did you catch that? Mercy now, judgment later. Mercy on the first incarnation, judgment on the second coming. Judgment is coming. Do not fool yourself. Do not allow yourself to be misled. Judgment is coming. A Catholic commentary on Holy Scripture said, there are, as it were, two things, the man and the sinner. God made man, and man made himself a sinner. Destroy what you made, that God may save what he made. You must hate your own work in you and love God's work in you. When that which you made begins to displease you, then your good works are beginning, inasmuch as you are accusing your bad works. The beginning of good works is the confession of bad works. You do truth, and you come to the light. What is it to do truth? You do not fondle yourself. You do not caress yourself. You do not flatter yourself. Do not say, I am just, when you are really not. Then you are beginning to do truth. Close quote, a Catholic commentary. We'll be right back.
Hi, this is Jim Havens, co-founder of the National Men's March to Abolish Abortion and Rally for Personhood. Some truths are self-evident, some rights are unalienable. It is a scientific fact that life begins at conception fertilization. It is a foundational moral truth that we ought not murder innocent human beings. Every human being is a human person with a right to life and the equal protection of law according to the 14th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution. Yet we have an ongoing daily mass murder of our little preborn brothers and sisters. It's time for all men and women of goodwill to rise up together in the public square and say no more. Come join us in Albany, New York on Saturday, June 3rd. Men, let's go first and gather at 9 a.m. for the Men's March. Women, we need you to join us at 10:45 a.m. for the Rally for Personhood outside of the New York State Capitol. We'll have some great speakers along with terrific opportunities for formation and fellowship before and after. Go to themensmarch.com for all the details. See you in Albany.
Please join us in a prayer to our guardian angel. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit, amen. O holy guardian angel, take care of our soul and body. Enlighten our mind that we may know the Lord better and love him with all our heart. Help us in our prayers so that we may not give in to distractions. Assist us with your advice so that we may see the good and carry it out with generosity. Defend us from the insidious snares of the enemy and sustain us in temptations that we may always be victorious. Remedy our coldness in our worship of the Lord. Cease not to protect us until you have brought us into paradise, where we will praise our good God together for all eternity. Amen.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Coming up at 30 past the hour, we're going to have a conversation with Andreas Wailzer from LifeSite News about his article on BlackRock, a company that seems to own the whole world. Very well connected, very powerful indeed. What is the story there, and how did they get to this level? We're going to have that conversation with Andreas Wailzer coming up at 30 past. Do join us if you can. But joining us right now from iCatholicMusic is Matt Maloney. Good morning to you, Matt.
Good morning, Joe. Happy to be with you today.
Praise be to God. We're grateful for your time. Matt Maloney in the morning on iCatholicMusic. iCatholicMusic, what is iCatholicMusic?
Well, iCatholicMusic is a pretty unique operation. So it really is the only Catholic radio station and app and stream that is 100% Catholic artists. So that's pretty unique. You know, about 2 weeks ago, Matt Maher, who's a Catholic, had the #1 Christian song in the country. And so it's nice that we have a platform where people can listen to him and have other Catholic artists that they can discover at the same time. The other cool thing about iCatholicMusic is you're not going to get any of that strange wishy-washy lyrics or stuff that maybe is contradictory to the faith, where people are putting together clever lines, but it's not quite what jives with our theology. So that's one of the things that you can feel safe about the music that you're listening to, because it's not going to contradict your faith.
If I'm not mistaken, correct me if I'm wrong, but iCatholicMusic is the only app of its kind in the world, right?
Correct. Yes. There's been other Catholic programs, an hour or 2 hours that feature Catholic artists, but nothing's 24 hours a day like this, and nothing exists in an app form. So yes, globally, as far as I know.
I remember back in 2000, I think it was 2008, 2009, I was producing a podcast and a radio show called Behold the Man, and I would try to feature in the beginning intro of my radio program, I would try to feature some Catholic musician. So I would go out and look for music. But this was the time before the real lockdown on copyrighted material. So I was able to find songs on the internet and play clips of them and didn't have any problems. Then that all changed when they really pursued legal action against that. And I remember I would try to find artists that nobody had ever heard of, and they were Catholic, and it was hard to find this type of content. Much easier to find Protestant bands, because there are radio stations all over our country that feature nothing but contemporary praise and worship, 98% of which is all Protestant. Isn't that true?
Mm-hmm. That's certainly true. Unfortunately, some Catholic artists are vague sometimes about what their faith is, and it can be difficult to really try to track people down. And it's a little uncomfortable to be saying like, hey, I see in the live chat, Mary, did you know? That's exactly what I was talking about earlier in terms of like, you're not going to hear that on this app. But yeah, it can be difficult to determine sometimes, is someone Catholic? Sometimes I have to take a deep dive into something to really sort of figure that out. But you're right. There was a time when things were less strict. The great thing about iCatholicMusic is we are all legit. So for our over-the-air station and for all of our web streaming and our app, we're actually reporting what we play. And so a percentage of what gets played, the royalties go back to the artist. So this is also a way to be able to support Catholic artists by engaging with the station, downloading the app, donating to iCatholicMusic. It's a whole structure for supporting Catholic artists and growing them and, kind of working together as a Catholic community.
Okay, so I think I have to address the 800-pound gorilla in the room. I'm a trad Catholic, put the label out there just to make it clear.
Yeah.
So I don't, when I go to mass, I don't want to hear contemporary praise and worship. I actually think I said this recently on a social post, and some people pushed back on me. They're like, "Oh, you're so rigid or whatever." Listen, I think Gregorian chant belongs at Holy Mass, but however, I do like to listen to contemporary praise and worship music, just not at mass. I mean, in the car, driving down the road, I want to hear it. It's okay. What do you think about that? I mean, this kind of praise and worship music, liturgical versus non-liturgical.
Yes. So I agree with you. First of all, let me let you know that we have gateway programming for someone like you. Sunday mornings, 6 a.m. to noon is Gregorian chant.
Nice.
So if you're driving to mass and you want a little Gregorian chant, with the family, we got to hear an iCatholicMusic. But yes, you're right. I mean, this is not an app to be, to take the place of a beautiful choir at mass. This is for family time. This is for times other than the liturgy. And everything you're going to hear here is not necessarily even praise and worship. There are songs that just recognize God or have a place for God in the songwriting. So this is really a music station that loves Jesus, loves Mary, is solid when theology comes into play. But yeah, you're right. It's a different environment than the liturgy, and that's good. I mean, we need to fill our lives with all sorts of things, and this is a safe place for that.
Now, we'll talk about the quality of the production. This is something I think you're always trying to up the game, right? We're looking for the best of the best that's out there. We all know that there's, especially coming out of like the 80s, 90s, early 2000s, there's a lot of hokey stuff out there. Is any of that on this
there really is.
app?
No, I think in the early days there was, and we sort of tried to filter that through for everybody, and we want people to just tune in, and we do have an over-the-air station in Lancaster, New York. So, for example, I can see someone scanning through the radio stations, and they come across something, they're like, "Oh, this is really good," and it might take a while before they're like, "Hey, wait, is this a Christian station or something?" So we try to have high standards for music quality, songwriting, keeping all that little, cheesy, hokey stuff out of the way. The other thing is this station is going to be appealing to all sorts of age groups. And, I think like if you have a teen and you've chosen to allow them to have a device, a cell phone or a tablet or something, this is an app that's safe for them. And they're also going to listen to it and not think that it's hokey or cheesy. They're going to have 24-hour music. You're going to know that it's safe, and the quality is going to be quite high. And I think they're going to enjoy it quite a bit.
You talk about safety. I think there's also the issue of, there's so many Protestant radio stations that play 24/7. Right in my own backyard, there's one of the biggest in the world exists here. They are a massive operation. 24/7 artists come here. They fly here just to be in studio at this particular outlet. And sometimes when you listen to their content, you're going to get some messaging that could be contradictory to the Catholic faith. So you have to worry about that kind of safety too, especially on people who aren't well formed, aren't well catechized, not sure, if a seed of doubt gets planted, whether or not they can process that well. Whereas on iCatholicMusic, you're never going to have that problem.
No, you're not. And, I check out the competition. So, I've listened to some other stations, and some of these, disc jockeys, show hosts, if you listen to them, it's really like, whoa, I can't believe that they just said that. Or is no one checking the theology? Some stuff that's a little kind of wacky, and like they're shooting from the hip, and it sounds good. But if you really break it down, it's like, that's really not how it works. It's a confusing take on Christianity. So you don't have to worry about that with iCatholicMusic. You're going to find that everything is going to be really consistent, and we vet stuff. There was one time several years ago where someone brought something to our attention. We took it, we brought it to a priest to have him vet that, and he was like, "Yeah, no, this is okay. What this person is trying to say is this, but this is consistent with our faith." So we have the ability, we have resources, we have priests and theologians we can go to if there ever were to be some sort of question.
In your show, Matt Maloney in the morning, so you are on from what time to what time?
Yeah, so the show, it's called St. Joe's Cafe. As you may know, I have a little bit of a coffee problem, so maybe you'll catch that connection between Joe, Joe and St. Joe's Cafe. Every St. Joe's Cafe is 7 a.m. to 10 a.m. Eastern. Every morning I have a coffee that I enjoy and I tell you about that I'm drinking. So today we're doing the Guadalupe Roastery's Brazilian Cerrado. Without getting too nerdy here, it's really good. It's got some fruity notes, a little dark chocolate, little almond. It also has a little bit of Lapsang Souchong, which is a Chinese black tea. So, so that's the nerdy level. But yeah, so 7 to 10 every morning. I'm kind of coming in, one of the great things about iCatholicMusic is it's commercial free. So like you're not just sitting through listening to tons of commercials, so I just sort of like, come on, I explain some of the songs, some of the new songs. One of the focuses that I'm trying to do is to bring in more new music, more new releases. And, I do a saint of the day. We can talk about some things in culture that's going on, the liturgical season, so we've been talking a lot about Eastertide and that whole thing. So that's another thing, that if you have a teen or family and you're listening together, we're going to talk about something like, hey, we're still, not that we are now, but, last week, we're still in the octave of Easter, so the kids hear that in their family and then maybe at church, and then they're also hearing it, on the radio. So it's surrounding yourselves with Catholicism, and it starts to feel a little more normal,
Yeah, praise be to God. You don't want to live in the news cycle 24/7. So as soon as you're done watching this show, just go listen to iCatholic Music, which, by the way,
come on over.
It is free, right? Like, we're not charging anything for this app.
Absolutely. No, absolutely free. You just go to your Apple store, your Android store, iCatholicMusic, all one word. I is in the letter. You can find it there. You can find us on Twitter at iCatholicMusic. We're on Facebook, iCatholicMusic. So you can go to iCatholicMusic.com. So you can stream it on the web. If you happen to be in the greater Buffalo area, you can listen online. I mean, you can listen over the air, or you can listen through the app. So there's a lot of ways to check it out, no matter where you are.
Tons of ways to get into it. I wish we had a little more time to talk about your history in music. Matt Maloney has a background in the Boston music scene. Praise be to God. So maybe next time we'll have you tell a little bit about your journey there. But Matt Maloney, check him out on iCatholicMusic. Download that in your iOS or Android app store today. Absolutely free. Share it with a friend. If you love contemporary praise and worship music, why not support Catholic artists? Because that's all we're going to play on iCatholicMusic, owned and operated by the Station of the Cross. Matt, thank you for your time today. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joe. God bless you.
God bless you too. Praise be to God. Thank you for everything you are doing on iCatholicMusic. Download that today. We're going to be right back. Coming up after the break, more breaking news and stories. Than Andreas Wailzer is going to be our guest. We're going to be talking about BlackRock. $20 trillion in assets being managed by a computer. What's up with that? We'll be right back.
Hello, this is Steve Gleason with your 1-minute tool for Catholic evangelism. Here's the question for your non-Catholic friend. When determining specific moral truths, most Christian churches say they use the Bible, so it's safe to say that they have agreement on doctor-assisted suicide, abortion, contraception, and embryonic stem cell therapy. Well, here's your 3 best friendship tools for Catholic evangelism. Number 1, a challenge for you. Speak with the 5 closest non-Catholic church pastors near to where you live. Inquire if they only use the Bible to determine their church stances on these issues. Secondly, my findings. There are some similarities on abortion, but varied with 2 key exemptions. No common stance on embryonic stem cell therapy, contraception was accepted by all, and no across-the-board agreement on doctor-assisted suicide. And thirdly, my comeback. Should these social issues of life really be determined through individual conviction? Well, maybe we should just leave the determinants of salvation up for grabs also. Remember, the ones Jesus called the least of these will always be in grave danger if their existence is left up to individual conviction. Finally, check the very stance of the Catholic Church on these weighty issues. It's impressive.
Do you love listening to the Station of the Cross on your car radio, but sometimes find yourself driving outside the listening area? Never miss another minute of your favorite show. Download the iCatholic Radio app so you can listen anywhere in the world 24 hours a day. The iCatholic Radio app is available for your phone in the Apple Store or for your Android phone in Google Play. Visit thestationofthecross.com for more information.
Are you ready to take on the world of flesh and the devil with just the facts? This is Jesse Romero, host of Jesus 911, heard weekdays at 2 p.m. Eastern. I'm joined each day by a variety of co-hosts like Ruben Nava, Paul Clay, Dan Schneider, and my amazing wife, Anita Romero. We tackle Catholic devotions, spiritual warfare, family life, saving America, and everything in between. Join us each weekday at 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific for Jesus 911. God bless you. Keep the faith.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean, and here are your headline news. Just the News reports Southwest Airlines briefly grounds all flights due to technology issues. Southwest Airlines briefly grounded all flights on Tuesday to what it's calling, quote, intermittent technology issues, close quote, just months after the airline suffered from major meltdown over the holiday season. The Federal Aviation Administration lifted the nationwide ground stop on Southwest later on Tuesday morning, but the pause is still in place for Southwest flights out of Dallas Love Field. Southwest is already being investigated by the Transportation Department after the airline experienced mass cancellations in late December. The Hill reports U.S. Embassy convoy came under fire in Sudan. A U.S. diplomatic convoy came under fire in Sudan, and Secretary of State Anthony Blinken affirmed this on Tuesday amid days of intense fighting between two rival forces in the country. Quote, I can confirm that yesterday we had an American diplomatic convoy that was fired on. All of our people are safe and unharmed, close quote, Blinken told reporters. Blinken has repeatedly called for a ceasefire as General Abdel Fattah Burhan of Sudan's armed forces battles for power with General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, who leads the paramilitary group Rapid Support Forces. The two generals are former allies who together orchestrated an October 2021 military coup. Washington Times reports Fox News settles $1.6 billion defamation lawsuit with Dominion Voting Systems and averts a trial. Fox News settled a defamation case on Tuesday brought by Dominion Voting Systems over allegations aired by the network that the 2020 presidential election was rigged in part by Dominion's voting machines. Dominion had sought $1.6 billion from Fox News, but just before opening statements began and with a jury already picked, the trial came to a halt. The lawyers had met with the judge for about 2 hours and agreed to settle the dispute. The exact amount is not known. However, CNN is reporting $787.5 million. Dominion's attorneys thanked the media for following the case, saying they'll continue to pursue accountability from other outlets as well. And those are your headline news. Praise be to God. Hey, I want to say hello and good morning to the 200-300 people listening on our iCatholic Radio mobile app. So it's not just iCatholic Music, it's also iCatholic Radio. Good morning to everybody on ICR. You can also download that app for free on your iOS or Android app store as well. But joining us now from LifeSite News is Andreas Wailzer, and he has an article out that I found really, really intriguing. In fact, I read it a few times. Everything you need to know about BlackRock, the company that owns the world. Boy, that's a headline right there. Andreas, good morning to you. Thank you for your time today.
Good morning, Joe. Thank you for having me.
Praise be to God that we appreciate this. This was a pretty extensive article. This is, you know, a lot of articles today are very short, 2-3 minute reads. This is 21 minutes of read time with a lot of detail. Let's start with BlackRock and just their background. How did they get to where they are today? What is their history?
Well, so to sum it up, it was sort of a spin-off from Blackstone, who's also a big asset manager, and they were founded in the 80s. And Larry Fink took them over from the beginning. He's now still a CEO, and he basically, you know, was the founder as well in the 80s. And they just grew bigger and bigger. They were more successful. They got more successful, and you know, by the year 2000, they were already managing about $1 trillion worth of assets, and so that's essentially what happened. They became their own business, like they became separated from Blackstone. And there's still a lot of confusion about BlackRock and Blackstone, and they even said that it was intentional. So when there's an interview where they even mentioned that they intentionally made this very confusing for people to not being able to distinguish the two. But anyway, so what really made BlackRock this huge global player was the financial crisis of 2007 and 2008. So because the Fed and other central banks, they turned to BlackRock to manage the large government bailouts that they ran. And one of the reasons for that was that Fink was sort of, Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, was sort of an expert on the whole, these financial instruments that led to the mortgage crisis, because he was actually the first one to design one of these so-called collateralized mortgage obligations. He designed them in the 80s when he was still not with BlackRock, with another company. And so he was kind of an expert on that. And you could argue, and many critics have argued, that he's responsible for the mortgage crisis, actually. His tools that he developed that led to this, huge mortgage crisis, that led to the financial crisis of 2008, as we all know, with, the Lehman Brothers going down and many other banks being bailed out and so on. And BlackRock was allowed to manage a lot of the bailouts in the US and worldwide. And that gave them a lot of influence and power, and they used that power very well. And they became sort of the top dog of the asset managers ever since then. And this is sort of like the summary of their history.
So one of the themes that I'm catching here, based on your article and what you just said, was BlackRock loves a good crisis. They seem to benefit from these crises.
Yeah, definitely. So they've gotten out on top from these crises like 2007 and 2008. And then, of course, they got even more powerful and influential after the latest big crisis, the COVID crisis, which is sort of a main focus point of my article, because I can go into that, or try to explain it, what they did in 2020, and why, it gives sort of a different outlook, that this whole COVID thing was maybe not really about a virus, but more about, financial interests that were very large and reshaping the financial world. And BlackRock certainly had a huge part in that. So because a few months before, in 2019, BlackRock sort of drew up the idea of the Federal Reserve and other central banks directly investing, or not investing, but directly basically pumping money into the economy, so into private businesses or public institutions, which hadn't been done before. Usually it's through the commercial banks, but they wanted to do it directly. And they set up the system. And of course, the central banks really liked the idea because, directly influencing the economy gives them more power, more influence. And that was set up in 2019 at a symposium called the Jackson Hole Economic Symposium in Wyoming. And that started on August 22nd, 2019. And the same day, it's insane, but on the same day, Larry Fink joined the World Economic Forum's Board of Trustees. So it's sort of a weird coincidence, isn't it? I mean, that happened on the exact same day that, Larry Fink officially joined forces with Klaus Schwab and the World Economic Forum. That they also started this process of directly in sort of pumping money into the economy with the Fed. So that started before the COVID crisis began in 2020.
So you talk about, I don't mean to interrupt you, but you're talking about power and influence and reach here. So World Economic Forum 2019, but also your article points out just how vast people who've worked at BlackRock have found their way to very high-powered, successful positions in corporations, but also political campaigns, our government, and more. So it seems like BlackRock is the hiring base for policymakers, similar to how Twitter, it goes and takes, and all these Facebook and Meta, they take all of these former intelligence officers and put them into their organization. Policymakers are taking BlackRock people and putting them into their organization. I'm noticing a trend there.
Yes, very good point. So basically, the Biden administration, they hired a lot of former BlackRock managers and BlackRock executives. Basically, they went from the Obama administration to going back to BlackRock when Trump was president, and then serving again in the Biden administration. So you see entanglement between the Democrats and BlackRock very strongly. The current head of the Christian Democrats, so-called Christian Democrats in Germany, Friedrich Merz, he used to be the head of BlackRock Germany. So there's a very strong connection between the highest level of politics and BlackRock, definitely. And you can see that trend. And you said it's a good comparison to compare it to the sort of intelligence agencies and FBI and Twitter, what we saw with the Twitter files. Yeah.
Yeah, so they're very much in a power player position here to have an influence. And as you stated already, they love a good crisis. And who was it that was, I think it was Hillary Clinton said, her aide said that we should never let a good crisis go to waste. So it feels very manipulated. Whether it is or not, I can't personally say, but it feels like the system is definitely manipulating the average people to make a financial gain. So at the end of the day, are we talking about good old-fashioned greed here, or is there something, deeper going on?
Oh, that's a good question. I cannot answer that definitively, of course. I can just say greed has something to do with it. I think it's also just, the hunger for power and to be able to shape the world in your own image and with your own ideas. That goes into it as well. There's a lot of things that go into it. I mean, ultimately, it's once organizations get so big and so global, sort of their only mode of being becomes, sustaining itself in a way. This is sort of this giant cabals tend to be that way, like BlackRock. So that would be my short answer, I suppose.
So we're seeing, you just said BlackRock has former employees and organizations in Europe. They have a lot of assets. I imagine they're managing for European, states or governments or just businesses. They're World Economic Forum members. They're obviously very much involved here in the United States. So what about in places like Asia, China, Russia? How are they in those locations?
Well, they're certainly also invested there. They are, they own, like BlackRock alone owns about, depending on how you see it, about 10 to 20% of the world's stocks and bonds. And or not owns, I should say not owns, that's not correct. It manages it, but it asserts influence through that. So yeah, it's definitely invested in China as well and all these other places. So it's basically invested all around the world. This is one of the reasons why it's interesting that climate activists actually called out BlackRock for being hypocrites, because they are pushing these net zero policies and these green policies on the one hand. But on the other hand, they have no problem supporting China, the biggest polluter in the world, or being invested there, and also being heavily invested in the oil and coal industry. And so actually, they're even getting pushback from the left, from climate activists. One of the protests that took place in New York, the New York headquarters last year, was by climate activists who said, they're greenwashing and they're not. Wow. They're hypocrites. They don't really care about the environment, which of course they don't. But it's not a surprise to me. They care about their power, influence, and so on. And they're just putting up this green facade in order to have an excuse.
Hold that thought. Andreas Wailzer is our guest. His article is Everything You Need to Know About BlackRock, the company that owns the world, over at LifeSiteNews.com. We're going to put a link to this in our show notes, thestationofthecross.com/ACT. We link to everything we talk about during the show, all the news articles I read, as well as our conversations with our guests, all in the show notes that'll be posted in just a little while, actually. Go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT to get that. But coming up after the break, let's talk about those ESGs, stakeholder issues. Let's talk about LGBTQ support. Let's also talk about the computer that manages $20 trillion of the world's assets. Seems like a lot riding on a computer, doesn't it? All that and more is coming up next. Don't go anywhere, but do share us with a friend. We'll be right back.
This is Franciscan Media's Saint of the Day for April 19th. Today we celebrate Saint Gianna Beretta Molla. In fewer than 40 years of life, Gianna Molla became a pediatrician, wife, mother, and saint. The 10th of 13 children, Gianna earned degrees in medicine and surgery, eventually opening a clinic in Mazzaro, Italy. Her 1955 marriage to Peter Molla was a happy one, and together they became the parents of a son and 2 daughters. Early in her 4th pregnancy, Gianna learned that a tumor was growing in her uterus along with the baby. Although the doctors recommended performing a hysterectomy, Gianna insisted that they remove only the offending tumor. With great faith and courage, Gianna made the choice that enabled her child to survive. 7 months later, Gianna died from childbirth complications following the delivery of her 3rd daughter, Gianna Emanuela. At her canonization in 2004, Pope John Paul II said of Gianna Beretta Molla, "This holy mother of a family remained heroically faithful to the commitment she made on the day of her marriage. The extreme sacrifice she sealed with her life testifies that only those who have the courage to give of themselves totally to God and to others are able to fulfill themselves." There's more about the saints along with inspiration and Catholic resources at our website, saintoftheday.org. From Franciscan Media, this has been Saint of the Day.
Each weekday from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern, the Station of the Cross brings you Mother Miriam Live.
Live your faith as if it's true. Live as a people of God and love one another. Do that, and you will convert your neighbors and the world.
Tune in from 10 to 11 a.m. Eastern for Mother Miriam Live on the Station of the Cross and our free iCatholic Radio mobile app.
Praise be to Jesus Christ. Welcome back to A Catholic Take, a bold synthesis of information and inspiration. I'm your host, Joe McLean. So good to be on with you. Praise be to God. Coming up at the top of the hour, the Holy Mass will air across the Station of the Cross Catholic Radio Network. But if you want to hang out with us for our insider conversation for the after show, you can get in on that by watching the live video feed and commenting directly. Just go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT, and you can find the live video there, as well as links to how you can join the insider crew on Telegram and get the private chat. Just go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Andreas Wailzer is our guest. He has an article over at LifeSiteNews.com on BlackRock. And let me just read this quote to you as a part of our conversation today. Fink, quote, "Fink has been using his influence over the corporate world to push the woke environmental, social, and governance ESG agenda. ESG is essentially a kind of social credit system for corporations to make sure that they toe the line on destructive net zero carbon emission policies and various other items of the globalist agenda," close quote. Andreas, you talked about that a little bit in the last segment, but here's the other kicker on this. They're also big fans of the digital currencies that are controlled by the governments, which is also a social credit system, which is also is already being used right now in places like the People's Republic of China, where if you jaywalk, you get fined directly out of your bank. They just take the money and they cut you out of going shopping. They cut you out of hotels. They cut you out of public transportation, all with a click of a mouse. BlackRock seems to be fully in favor of all of that.
Yep, certainly. It certainly seems that way. And unfortunately, this seems to be that they're taking China as a model, these globalists who BlackRock is certainly a part of. And they're pushing CBDCs, like you said, these digital currencies. And they're saying, of course, it's about, fighting money laundering and, making easier transactions and so on. So that's the reason. Of course, it's always these reasons. But like you said, it can lead in combination with a social credit score, which ESG essentially is. ESG is essentially a social credit score for businesses. And together with these social credit systems, the CBDC, allows for total control. No private transactions anymore if they gonna push out cash, which it seems to be what's happening here. And yeah, BlackRock is of course in favor of that. That's more control. They'll be one of the winners of this whole system. And so they're pushing CBDC, ESG, and also the so-called Corporate Equality Index, which is part of ESG. That's all things about the LGBT issues, to see how LGBT-friendly, quote-unquote, corporations are. So if you're not openly supporting this lifestyle, which we as Catholics know is sinful, then, you're going to have a lower score. That means you're going to get less investments. That means no government funds probably. And so businesses will have to toe the line if they don't want to get into real trouble, especially like big corporations who are dependent on investments and so on. So that is definitely what BlackRock is pushing, and that's what they're doing with their influence. They're trying to shape the economy and therefore the world in their image. And Fink had a famous quote in 2017 where he said basically that, we at BlackRock, we are forcing behaviors. That is what they're doing. They're forcing behaviors in order to achieve, an economy that's to their liking.
Wow, that's pretty intense to think that they're open and honest about it. They're not even hiding in the shadows in that regard. Now, some people are pushing back. Some states have pushed back, removing their assets from being managed by BlackRock and trying to ban ESG. I think you reported on that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. So, Florida and Governor DeSantis, once again, is one of the people leading the charge. They defunded BlackRock, or not defunded, but they pulled out $2 billion out of BlackRock funds, which sounds a lot, but really isn't. Some other states have followed suit, Arkansas, Louisiana, for instance. And DeSantis is also leading a coalition of 19 Republican governors who want to push back against ESG. So that's definitely a good start. It's not going to destroy BlackRock because BlackRock is way too big. They're managing $9 to $10 trillion dollars worth of assets. So a few billion, it's not going to destroy them. But it's a start. And I think the most important thing is people are waking up to it. So that means that politicians will be forced to act on it, especially conservative Republican politicians. And that's definitely a step in a good direction because, I think that's the only way, or that's also why I wrote the article, is because I think public exposure is the only way that we can start pushing back against BlackRock.
Now, you mentioned how much they manage. I think that was a good point in your article as well, because you talk about, officially it's like 10 trillion, but you speculate it's actually higher. And my mind was blown by the realization that, I guess I knew that, of course, you're going to use computers to run models, to look at risk assessment, to make better choices. But that's one thing. It's another thing to put everything on autopilot. You speculate $20 trillion in this. $20 trillion. That's a lot of money for the whole world, really. And it's all being run on autopilot at this point. Are we talking artificial intelligence is deciding the fate of what happens to this $20 trillion in risk assessment?
Yeah. So what the $20 trillion is about is it's the IT system of that BlackRock developed called Aladdin. And it's not only the reason why it's more than 10 trillion is that it's not only used by BlackRock, but it's also used by Vanguard, the second biggest asset manager in the world, and a few others, State Street Corp and other companies. And 20 trillion is like the last number they officially reported in 2017. They stopped reporting the number, so it's probably much higher than that by now. Wow. And so that's not all managed by BlackRock, but it is managed inside their IT system. And they have gone more and more into using AI and computer systems to not only run the simulations, but also make the investment decisions. So buying or selling based on this algorithm, which again, is of course not perfect. It's not going to be perfect. And they're also feeding it with sort of these green agenda or items. So again, and they can design the algorithm, and that is, of course, very dangerous because, the algorithm could be completely flawed, or it could be intentionally flawed as well, or even unintentionally. But basically, the computer system is managing most of the wealth of people who don't even know most of the time, because it works, you're invested in an ETF or in a pension fund, but actually BlackRock is the one managing that, So that's a lot of money that belongs to millions of people. And it's all in a computer system, or most of it, a lot of it is in one computer system that's owned by BlackRock. So it doesn't really sound too good to me if I hear about that.
No, it doesn't sound good at all. So we are seeing pushback in America. We just talked about that a second ago with states like Florida or Arkansas or Missouri, some others. But what about in Europe? Is there any pushback in Europe, or is Europe basically totally sold out for the globalists and the elitists?
I think so. Being from Europe myself, I think it's definitely more difficult and in Western Europe to push back against this than it is in the United States politically. But there are protests, like we've seen in France. There's protests at the BlackRock headquarters. So it's definitely increasing the pushback from the people on the streets. Not maybe from the politicians, but from the people on the streets, definitely.
Wow, Andreas Wailzer, thank you for your time today. I really appreciated this article. It was very detailed, a lot of great information, background information, their connectivity, and all that, and plus a lot more. So I encourage you to check it out. Go to lifesitenews.com, and you can look for all of his articles, Andreas Wailzer, over there. But we're going to put a link to this specific article in our show notes, which are going to be posted here the next 10, 15 minutes. Just go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT. Andreas, God bless you. God love you. Would love to have you back. Don't go anywhere.
Me, Joe. God bless.
The Holy Mass will be airing next, but join us in the after show. We'll see you next.
So what did you think of today's show? Let's discuss that right now in the after show. Your take on the after take. Comment, interact live with me and the team. All you need to do is search for one of our live video feeds on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, Twitter, LinkedIn, and elsewhere. Simply search for the Station of the Cross, Joe McClain, or A Catholic Take. I'm looking forward to seeing you and interacting with you directly. It all starts right now. It's the after show.
Also streaming on Rumble.
All right, we're clear, Joe. We're on with the after show.
Praise be to God. Andreas is welcome to stay if he wants to. He's welcome to hang out with us. But welcome to the after show, where we get a lot more casual and comfortable about the conversation, and you get to drive that conversation with whatever you want to talk about. If you are new here and you've never done this before, let me encourage you to leave a comment. Let us know where you're from. I would really appreciate seeing you here. But good morning to you, Laura, on the Telegram group, the Insider group. Good morning to you, T-Storm. Good morning to you, Yvonne. Good morning to you, Eileen. Good morning to you, Mike K. and Damon. Praise be to God. Hey, by the way, Josh Patterson, good morning to you. And Ashley, I'm so glad, good morning to you, that none of your relatives were harmed in New York City. Praise be to Jesus for that. By the way, someone said, was it Damon? Someone said it was Anna's birthday. Anna, happy birthday to you. Praise be to God. I would sing happy birthday to you, but I don't think that would be very charitable or kind. So I won't do that. But good morning to you and happy birthday. Alaric, Ave Maria, my friend. Andrea Lamorte, Kilroy Jones, Yvonne, good morning to you. Paul, Alberto, our friend from the UK, good morning to you. Good to see you here. Praise be to God. Let's see, I'm scrolling backwards. I know I saw Kim Sunderman on as well. Good morning to you guys. Thanks for hanging out with us today. What do you guys think of, how many people downloaded iCatholicMusic? Let me know in the comments. And then also BlackRock. Like, is it just me, or maybe I'm just kind of naive and I wasn't paying attention, but I felt like they snuck up on us. I felt like all of a sudden in 2020, it was like everybody started talking about BlackRock. And I'm like, where did that come from? Like, I just paid no attention prior to that, I suppose.
We could ask Andreas about that. He's still on with us.
Andreas, good morning. Thanks for hanging out with us today in the after show. I appreciate it.
Hi, yeah.
By the way, I really enjoyed I enjoyed some of the content that got deleted off of YouTube. They deleted LifeSite News' John Henry Weston channel recently, and I think they deleted 2 LifeSite News channels so far, which is really unfortunate. But Your interview with Alexander Trugoel, very good. You started, right? If I remember from your bio, you were with the Boniface Institute. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. So I worked with the St. Boniface Institute and with Alexander Trugoel, who you had on before, I saw. And we met during this whole COVID craze when it began, when we organized rosary rallies in Vienna and all of Austria to pray for, well, first against the disease, and then mostly against the tyranny that was being rolled out.
What were you doing before? What did you do before you were working for the Boniface Institute?
Well, I was in finance, actually. I was doing I studied business education, and I was working in finance. But especially with COVID, things were getting so bad. I mean, we just talked about BlackRock, and how the world is sort of being attacked by these globalist forces and these evil forces. So I had sort of a change of career a little bit because I had the opportunity to go into a field where I had the feeling I could directly work for the good, hopefully. And now with LifeSite.
Yeah, amen to that. Bridget Dunn, good morning to you. Good to see you here. Praise be to God. Kim Sunderman and Rhaegar82. Angel Knight, good morning to you. Mora, good morning to you. Praise be to God. Glad to see you guys here. Thanks for hanging out with us this morning. A lot of great conversation. I'm having to scroll way back to get to everybody, but good morning to everybody. Lots of great interaction today. Praise be to Jesus. T-Storm says, I need to remove some junk from my phone before I can add another app. I have so many apps like I don't ever use. I might use 10 apps total, my entire phone. I have like 80,000. I need to delete all of them and just keep the 10. I don't even know why I bother with the rest. It's like, what's the point? Just delete them. Some of them I paid for, so I have like a guilt where like you paid for it, you got to keep it. But I don't ever use them, so I just need to move on emotionally. Andreas, so let me ask you this. So you worked in finance. I have to imagine, because I used to work in corporate America, and you can't really live your faith all that well there. You have to be very careful about what you say and what you do and what you share with other people. Were you experiencing that kind of pressure, especially in the financial field, a very regulated field, I'm sure in Europe as much as in America?
Yes, definitely. I mean, my closest coworkers, they knew that I was Christian and Catholic, that I was faithful. So that wasn't really the issue, but of course you have to be really careful what you say. But to be honest, the biggest issue was the whole COVID thing with the COVID shots and so on. That was sort of the thing where I had to be the most careful because, that was a very intense moment in history, especially in Austria. If you followed it a little bit, Austria was the first country in the world, or at least in the Western world, to introduce a general vaccine mandate and so on. So we had to go through all of that, and there was a lot of pressure, with getting, the vaccine and so on. So that was like the biggest issue that I faced, more, to be honest, even more than the faith issue.
Yeah, I had Alexander on when that happened when that first happened in Austria. I had him on the show to talk about that, actually. We had him on a couple of times to talk about the pushback for that, which was great. Andrea Lamort says the whole ESG thing, she says, is a choke. I think she means joke. Is a choke. Maybe she means choke point. I don't know. Boards of public companies all have to put time, money, and resources for that effort. It's ridiculous. I think it's a great point, Andrea, because think about that. Like grown-ups pretending, like Bud Light did recently, and they lost over $1 billion worth in their assets as a result to their the fierce pushback against their woke ideology. Like grown-ups who run big corporations pretending that error is truth and truth is error. Like that seems bizarre to me. Even if you're not Catholic, it just like I can't wrap my head around how people who run major corporations and have to manage $1 billion worth plus and you're going to revamp all the world just so that you can say your green energy is virtue. It's like virtue signaling. But at the same time, you're ignoring how the materials are acquired to produce your solar panels and your lithium ion batteries. You're ignoring the slave labor that happens to manufacture those items in China after they got the materials from children labor in mines in Africa, irregardless of how those materials contaminated waterways and babies are being born with birth defects in and around the towns that manage those mines. You're going to ignore all that. You're going to ignore the fact that the solar panel that had to go through slave labor and child labor and birth defects also only operates at 20% efficiency at best. So not even 100%. So you would need to fill the entire earth with solar panels just to kind of manage what we have now. Not to mention that every Tesla is essentially filled with coal power and not solar power or wind power. I mean, the windmills that dot our landscape also kill birds and other wildlife. Doesn't that bother you? Like, you see what I'm saying? Like, it seems schizophrenic. It seems not just hypocritical, but schizophrenic to me for companies, grown-ups, very well-educated people in business and finance who ignore plain facts. Like, Andreas, can you help me understand, how is it these very well-educated people who run these corporations just ignore all of this and go along to get along with ESG? I don't understand.
Yeah, so I agree. I think it's a complete scam. Like you just mentioned a few very good points that it doesn't even make sense. I don't think you're really protecting the environment. Every form of energy is going to impact the environment in some way. And, the focus on CO2 emissions and that being the biggest thing is, I think, it's a wrong approach. I don't think that that's going to solve the issues. And I don't think that the issues are what they're trying to make them out to be. Like these models, these catastrophic models of have failed in the past, of the world basically ending. And I think it's the same with BlackRock. It's about power and influence, and that's the way they're gonna do it. They can't just say, "Oh no, we're gonna just get more powerful and more influential," because people wouldn't like that. So they're just saying, "Oh no, we're not actually trying to get more powerful. We're actually trying to save the planet." You see, it's just for the good of humanity.
But that's what gets me, though. They're smart people. They can do some homework and say, okay, yeah, it would be nice if we had clean, renewable energy that had no downsides or no consequences. I mean, who wouldn't? I mean, some people call that nuclear energy, but neither here nor there. I mean, like, it would be nice to say my solar panels are an amazing product. They do great things, and I don't have to worry about fossil fuels. Like, I guess that'd be okay, but the reality is they come with downsides. They come with consequences. Smart people should look at that and go, okay, well, I don't know that we should participate in child labor in Africa that also leads to contamination of the environment itself. I don't know that we should participate in Uyghur slave labor camps in China that produce these solar panels and these lithium ion batteries that also contaminate the environment. Like, you know what I mean? Like, I just can't understand how they can talk out of both sides of their mouth when their job is to run very successful companies, make sure the bottom line is profitable, make sure that they're providing great products and services to their clients, taking care of their employees, et cetera, et cetera. You would think they would go, hey, listen, this doesn't make financial sense for us to waste so much money down a rabbit hole that has other baggage, but common sense is just tossed out the window. And it seems like, and this is what gets me about the higher education pressure around the whole world. Families are pressured to send their kids to college, because they can't become anything if they don't get a college degree. And yet the world is filled with college-educated, advanced doctorate degree-educated people who commit the worst common logical fallacies. It's bizarre. We live in Twilight Zone to me. If this is not diabolical confusion, I'm not sure what is. You're welcome to comment however you like.
Yeah, you made some good points. Well, again, it's about these companies like BlackRock and so on, they're applying pressure. So in a way, it does maybe make sense economically to go into these green policies, because if you don't, then you're just going to have a bad ESG rating, right? So now it sort of does make sense economically if you're getting pressured by organizations like BlackRock or by politicians. So that's one issue. And also, I think there's a lot of the university system is very corrupted, and it's very one-sided to the left, obviously. And that goes for, the more I research, I think that goes for almost every field. People, it's interesting because they accuse Catholics of appealing to authority, when we appeal to the church and to the teaching of the church and to the Bible and so on. But, today's secular left and secular sort of establishment appeals to authority all the time when they just say, this is what the science says, and quoting some study that's probably flawed in one way or another. And but just appealing, this is the scientific consensus. Whether that's, like you said, whether that's logical or not doesn't really matter, because it's the science. There's a lot of appeal to authority, and not a lot of logical thinking, like if A then B, etc. I don't think that's really taught at universities, and powerful people of today don't really like people thinking too logically, I think.
Yeah, I think parents ought to be very careful about sending their kids off to college. They should think through that process before they make those decisions, because college is a great place to go and lose your faith. Tim H. says, liberalism is a mental disease. It destroys one's ability for common sense, rational thinking. It surely does, doesn't it? Paul asks a question. Andreas, do you think people that have no investments in BlackRock will be treated in a particularly harsh way? So let me re-ask that question slightly different, Paul. So, Andreas, are we going to see, or are we seeing a case where there's such power and manipulation, there's such connectivity, there's such manipulation in this, that unless these companies invest in BlackRock, they're already being blacklisted?
It's a good question. I don't think that's for individuals. I don't think it will be that way, because they don't need to apply pressure to you personally if you're not invested in any stocks or bonds or anything. They can assert power over you in other ways. But with corporations, it may be different, and it's essentially very hard to avoid BlackRock, because they're managing so much of the stocks and bonds. Or if you're invested in any pension funds, anywhere, anything on the stock market, it's essentially impossible, or it's very hard to avoid BlackRock. And if you're avoiding BlackRock and going into Vanguard or State Street Corp, it's basically the same thing. So it's very hard. I don't have a good answer to how we, my best answer is to, expose what they're doing and to put public pressure on them, and political pressure, like we're seeing, like with in the US with some Republican governors. That's the only path that I see right now. I think you can't boycott all the asset managers in the world, like the big ones who are essentially aligned on these ESG things and so on. BlackRock is just the biggest of them. So that's very difficult. You would need a different economic system entirely, and that's not going to happen so quickly.
That's a follow-up. I'm going to ask a follow-up to that here in a second. But good morning to you, Rachel Jordan. Good morning to you, Susan from Syracuse, New York. June Yabara, Don. Good morning to you, Norman from Hawaii. Praise be to God, my friend. How are you? Patty, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us. Sci-Fi Mike, feeling very lonely over there on Rumble. We used to have a lot more commenters on Rumble. If you're on Rumble right now, leave us a comment. Let us know where you're from. I would love to. I'd love to give you a shout out. But Sci-Fi Mike, good morning to you. Good to see you, my friend. Praise be to God. Andreas, you just mentioned something that made me think. There are a lot of people in the conservative right movement in America in particular that talk about an alternative currency, an alternative economy, an alternative market where we create our own systems and we play by our rules. We don't have to participate in the other rules. Have you ever heard about that? And what are your thoughts about that? So, like, for instance, Gab they got banned from all payment processors. So they had to build their own payment processing system, essentially. So they kind of really became the wind behind the sail for this alternative economy. What are your thoughts about alternative economies?
It's certainly a good idea to have that. Time will tell which sort of payments methods are the best. I mean, Bitcoin is obviously one, the whole crypto thing, because our current fiat money is not based on anything. So, and now if the central banks are just printing money nonstop, we're going to have a lot of inflation, and that's going to be a problem. But so you could have sort of, for internal trading, you could have a monetary system, an alternative one, and Bitcoin certainly is, and these kind of currencies are a possibility. But whether they will be successful and whether you'll be able to actually avoid the fiat currency system, and that seems very sort of unlikely if you're not going full Amish and living off the grid completely. That seems. It seems difficult to me. I think it will be sort of a mixture between both. You to have these alternative systems, maybe to fall back on, but I think you're also going to have to participate in like the normal quote unquote economy and with the fiat currency. I don't see a possibility how you're not going to do that. So we're just going to have to put, I think, pressure on politicians and to achieve political change and to push back. More and more people are waking up to the evils that are going on. So if there's a critical mass of people, I don't think BlackRock and all these, even with all their money and influence, if 60-70% of the population are against them, and they're not going to be able to pull all these things off. So I think, at least in my opinion, the most important thing is just putting out information and trying to push back as well as we can. But also, having these backup currencies and the alternative system is certainly good. I'm not against it. In fact, I think it's good. I think in the end, we need to go back to something like a gold-backed currency in the long run to have a functioning economy that's not completely insane like it is now.
One of the other aspects of your article that kind of pricked my mind was just like the scale that we're talking about. When I was a kid, millions of dollars was such a massive number. And now that I'm old, we're talking trillions of dollars. Like the United States gave $100 billion worth of either money and or guns, bullets, etc. to Ukraine. $100 billion. We are now living in debt, I think to the tune of $6 billion a day in our country. And BlackRock stopped reporting at 20 trillion. Because they know the scale is going through the roof. Like the scale of money, the scale of debt, the scale of assets is just it seems to me like it's going astronomical. Is that just inflation? Or you're a finance guy, help me understand the scale of things.
Yeah, good. Again, good question. I mean, it's definitely some of it. It's a lot of has to do with inflation. I mean, I don't know the numbers for the U.S. now from the top of my head, but in Europe, in the Eurozone, they basically almost doubled the amount of money in sort of the economy through 2 years, like in the 2 years from 2020 to 2022. During COVID. So they doubled the amount of money that's, going around. So that's obviously, that has a huge, that leads to huge inflation, obviously. I mean, it's just, again, common sense. They're trying to blame it on Putin and on the Ukraine war. I mean, that has something to do with it. But I mean, mostly it's just the money printing all the time and the government policies that led to that. So yeah, it has to do with inflation. A lot of it has to do with inflation, and these are another thing is that during COVID, like I think the first year of COVID, like the 100 or 300 richest people in the world increased their net worth by like 50%, while middle and lower class like lost a lot of their net value. So you can see it's just an upwards distribution, especially in the last couple of years. And that has been going on for a long time. Houses have become much more difficult to afford. Like in the 60s, it was much easier to afford a house on one income. And now it's basically impossible to afford one on two incomes in many places. And that's because, the money has lost its worth much faster than our income has grown. And so I think a lot of it has to do with the monetary system that's been implemented since, especially the founding of the Federal Reserve in 1913, and then with abolishing the gold standard and so on in the 70s. That has a lot to do with it. This monetary system is, I think, really, the more I read about it, I think really benefiting a very, very small minority of elites and is hurting most other people. And I'm not, saying, rich people are evil or something. I'm not saying like a communist argument here or Marxist argument, but it's just the fact that I think the monetary system is basically immoral as the way it's set up right now.
Mike K says, we gave 100 billion we borrowed from China. Let's be real. I know that's the other thing. China was buying our debt. I mean, are they buying our debt still? I'm not sure they're buying our debt much anymore. We're having a hard time. The Fed is having to buy the debt essentially and to carry the debt because China doesn't want to buy our debt anymore, considering that we may be on the verge of a war with Taiwan, which I certainly hope we don't go to war with Taiwan or over Taiwan. But everybody seems to want to go get dressed up for a party. And they're all standing around waiting to start dancing. So that's never a good sign. So we'll see. Which is another interesting thing. Let me ask you, Andreas, from your perspective, living and being from Europe, living in Europe. Do you guys, when you look at the world, I mean, does it feel like the Ukraine situation could pull us into yet another world war? The China situation could pull us into yet another world war? It seems like we're always on the verge of yet another world war. And everybody thinks that if we go to yet another world war, it'll be infinitely worse than the last one. The last one was pretty bad.
Well, yeah, I certainly hope we're not on the way to a world war, but you can never know. I think that hopefully our politicians are still not crazy enough to actually pull this off, because if we have so many nuclear weapons that it's that it would be so dangerous, and they would blow themselves up as well. So I think they're not that crazy. Like, they're very power hungry and everything, but they also want to preserve their power. And starting a world war, I'm not sure if that's not too dangerous, even for them, even if they think they could benefit from it. So I'm cautiously optimistic that it's not going to happen, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not a geopolitical expert. I just pray that it's not going to happen. Yeah,
we certainly are on the brink of. It's like we're waiting for a shoe to drop, the metaphorical, proverbial shoe to drop. Because look at what's going on in France. They are burning and rioting there. The pension plan got raised by 2 years, and they're burning and rioting now for weeks upon weeks upon weeks. Now, I know it's not that simple. It's more complex than that. But Macron just does it anyway, regardless of the riots. And it seems like the French people are getting kind of fed up with the illegal immigration and the behavior of these illegal immigrants in their communities. And yet governments don't listen to their people. Australia locked down its citizens in 2020 to the point where they arrested a single individual on a beach all by themselves. Like, this is bizarre. It's mental illness, it seems to me, from the outside looking in. And yet we see this all across Europe, all across the West, United States, Canada, England, Australia. We're all acting in very bizarre ways. I feel like that's a recipe for disaster. We're just waiting for the shoe to drop. What would you say to that?
Yeah, definitely. I think I think there will be big societal and political shifts in the upcoming years, because I don't think this system can continue any longer. they'll try to prolong it again. I think COVID was again sort of a way to prolonging it and pushing back the collapse of the financial system. But you can see, for instance, in Europe, I said I'm a bit less hopeful about Western Europe, but these sort of right-wing parties that are against this globalism, I don't always agree with them on everything, but they're on the rise and they're winning. Like their poll numbers are going up everywhere because people are just fed up, and just even normal people that are not political are realizing that, like you said, that there's something is not right here. It's not the 80s anymore where there's bad things happening, but we're still relatively fine in the West. I think we're seeing it's just getting more and more heated.
Hold on for a second. My headphones got disconnected. Sorry, guys. I got all tangled over here. Myra Wade, good morning to you. Susan Weber, good morning to you. Thanks for hanging out with us today. Praise be to God. Susan says, I think the elite are using war to bring the new world order faster. She also says Ukrainian people were expendable pawns. 400 million was the recent number. 400 million trimmed off the top of that 100 billion that the certain government figures in Ukraine have been putting in their back pockets. So keep that number. 400 million, like out of 100 billion, it's no big deal. It's a small little percentage of it all. But 400 million. Imagine what we could do in Catholic evangelization with $400 million. I mean, just think about that for a second. The scale is just mind-numbing to me. By the way, we're going to run out of time here in just about 4 minutes from now. And Andreas Wailzer has been our guest from LifeSite News. But let me just end on this point. So there's been a guy on LinkedIn, because I post the content there as well. And LifeSite News just got deleted from YouTube. John Henry Weston's channel got deleted from YouTube. So they're on other platforms, their own, including LifeSiteNews.com. But this guy on your LinkedIn has been commenting on my comment, get off this platform, stay off this is a business platform, stay away. And, I find that laughable, actually, as though Catholics should not have an opinion of everything on planet Earth. All things in the universe we should look at through the Catholic lens, because it's the lens God founded. It's the lens God gave to the world, to mankind. It is the only church he founded. He founded no other church. And we see everything through that Catholic lens, to include finances, to include BlackRock, ESG, and all the rest. So, Andreas, on that note, I just want to say thank you for your reporting. I think it's important. I think it's powerful. I think it is raising awareness. And as Catholics, we need to take our faith to the public space, to finances, to politics, to art, to culture, to business, and everywhere in between. We have to have a Catholic take. And if we don't share that Catholic take, then we are doing a disservice to the kingdom of God. Wouldn't you say?
You're absolutely right. I mean, Catholic means universal, and it's a universal church. And God created the whole world, and he created his church. And we are, of course, meant, like you said, to analyze everything and to look at everything through the lens of our faith. And there's no issue that we shouldn't address or keep out of. You're absolutely right. Yeah, I agree.
Lori, good morning to you. I'm sorry to hear that CDT has been having problems. I'm not sure what that's about. That's too bad. Susan also says Biden has his pockets filled too. Yeah, the Biden administration is the BlackRock administration. I mean, that's what gets me. It's like, there's so many former BlackRock employees making policies now. They're not elected officials. They're hired employees. They get a paycheck whether you voted for them or not. And then, of course, we see that similar parallel, and Elon Musk confirmed that with Tucker Carlson this week, that so many former intelligence personnel out of our government three-letter agencies now work in social media platforms. Why is that? That seems weird, don't you think? Seems really weird. Maybe there's a trend. Maybe it's their background and training that lends to the psychology. I don't know. But he also affirmed that the government had unfiltered access to all information on Twitter, to include your personal direct messages. So it is a rigged system. So be not conformed to this world, but rather conform your mind to God. and to his will for you, for your life, and for this world. Andreas Wailzer, thank you for your time today. God bless you. God love you. Have a great day, sir.
Thank you for having me, Joe. Have a good day. Bye.
Yeah, we'll have to have you back soon. God bless you all. The show notes are posted. Go to thestationofthecross.com/ACT, and we'll see you right back here tomorrow morning to talk about Garabandal.